In 2015, Dubai was the crown jewel of the new Middle East, a city where oil money built dreams into reality. Najwa Al-Mansouri was the epitome of that dream. Designer gowns worth more than most people's annual salaries. Diamonds that caught light like captured stars. A smile that graced the society pages of Gulf News and Emirates Woman magazine. But on September 23, 2015, construction workers renovating an abandoned villa in Al-Khawanij found her body, 60 miles from the glittering towers she once called home. What they discovered would unravel one of the most shocking tales of revenge, power, and betrayal in the Emirates' modern history. To understand how Najwa Al-Mansouri ended up dead in a construction site, we must first understand the golden prison she called home in Emirates Hills, one of Dubai's most exclusive neighborhoods. The Al-Mansouri villa sprawled across 3 acres of manicured perfection, Italian marble floors reflecting crystal chandeliers imported from Venice, hand-woven Persian carpets worth more than luxury cars, an infinity pool that seemed to merge seamlessly with the championship golf course beyond. In 2015, the UAE was still very much a traditional society beneath its modern veneer, explains Dr. Amina Hassan, a domestic violence expert who has studied cases across the Gulf region. Women like Najwa had all the luxuries money could buy, but very little actual autonomy over their own lives. Najwa married Fawaz Al-Mansouri in 2012, a union celebrated across Dubai's elite circles. He was 42, she was 26. He controlled a construction empire that was literally transforming Dubai's skyline, building the towers that would define the city's future. She brought beauty, impeccable social connections, and the appearance of the perfect Emirati wife. Their wedding photos from 2012 show Najwa radiant in a traditional white kaftan embroidered with gold thread, Fawaz's possessive hand firmly placed on her waist. The first year, Najwa seemed genuinely happy, recalls Basma Al-Zahra, who had been friends with Najwa since their university days at American University of Sharjah. She was decorating their new villa with antiques from Paris, planning elaborate charity events for the Children's Hospital, doing everything a young wife from a good family should do. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. She stopped making decisions about even the smallest things: what abaya to wear to Friday prayers, which friends to invite for coffee, where to shop for household items. According to friends who spoke on condition of anonymity, Fawaz's control manifested in ways that were subtle but psychologically devastating. In his home office, Fawaz would methodically review Najwa's daily schedule on his laptop, checking her BlackBerry messages with clinical precision. He tracked absolutely everything. Her Egyptian driver, Ahmed, reported directly to him about every destination, every stop, even how long she spent at each location. The Filipino housekeepers were instructed to document who visited, who called, what she ordered online. If she bought anything without his explicit permission, even something as simple as a new lipstick from Sephora, there would be consequences. Those consequences, according to medical records obtained from American Hospital Dubai, included injuries that Najwa consistently explained away as accidents, falls down the villa's marble stairs, mishaps with heavy car doors, sports injuries attributed to activities she never actually participated in. The hospital records, with names redacted, show a disturbing pattern of injury documentation from 2013 to 2014. By 2015, social media was becoming critically important in Dubai's elite circles, notes Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a forensic psychologist. Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, they were platforms for displaying perfect lives to the world. For women like Najwa, maintaining that flawless digital image became essentially a full-time occupation. Najwa's Instagram account from 2015 presents a carefully curated vision of luxury, limited edition Hermes handbags, exotic vacations to the Maldives and Switzerland, charity luncheons at 5-star hotels. But experts who study patterns of domestic abuse recognize something far more sinister in these meticulously crafted images. Every photo was perfectly composed, lighting professional, poses unnaturally rigid. She was never truly smiling with her eyes, what psychologists call a Duchenne smile. The poses were rigid, controlled, almost military in their precision. Even her captions were formal and distant, reading more like press releases than personal thoughts. This was a woman performing happiness for an audience, not someone genuinely living it. She would spend literally hours getting ready for these photo sessions around the house, remembers Hannah Al-Mahmoud, who worked as the family's housekeeper from 2013 to 2016. Hair, makeup, lighting, everything had to be perfect. Mr. Fawaz would personally review every single picture before she was allowed to post them. Sometimes he would make her delete entire photo albums because he didn't approve of her expression or posture. By early 2015, Najwa's world had shrunk to precisely the size of Fawaz's expectations. Business dinners at the Burj Al Arab, where she spoke only when directly addressed. Shopping expeditions to the Gold Souk with his female relatives providing constant supervision. A life of unimaginable luxury that felt increasingly like a beautifully decorated prison cell. Security footage from Dubai Mall shows Najwa browsing designer boutiques, always accompanied by at least 2 other women, never alone, never spontaneous. But Najwa had discovered one secret outlet that Fawaz had surprisingly approved of: art classes at the Dubai Community Theatre and Arts Center in Oud Metha. He viewed it as appropriately cultural for a woman of her social standing. It was there, during a traditional Arabic calligraphy workshop in March 2015, that she encountered a man who would become both her salvation and her ultimate destruction. Sheikh Mahir Al-Thani was everything Fawaz wasn't. Where her husband commanded through intimidation, the sheikh charmed through intellectual conversation. Where Fawaz controlled, Mahir seemed to liberate. At the Dubai Community Theatre and Arts Center, amid the scent of frankincense and the soft scratch of reed pens on parchment, their worlds collided during a traditional Arabic calligraphy workshop. Sheikh Mahir was 48 in 2015, recently divorced from his second wife, with significant business interests spanning Qatar and the UAE. He possessed the kind of refined elegance that came from generations of breeding salt and pepper, beard meticulously groomed, designer thobe tailored to perfection, hands that moved with the practiced grace of someone accustomed to being watched and admired. He had built a carefully cultivated reputation as a patron of the arts and an advocate for cultural preservation, frequently quoted in Gulf newspapers about the importance of maintaining Emirati heritage in an increasingly globalized world. Sheikh Mahir had a very specific approach, reveals a former business associate who spoke on condition of anonymity. He targeted women who were intelligent but trapped, usually by traditional marriages that stifled their potential. He presented himself as the cultured alternative to their controlling husbands, the man who saw their minds, not just their beauty. What Najwa didn't know was that Sheikh Mahir had a pattern. Investigation into his personal life uncovered at least 4 previous relationships with married women from Gulf elite families between 2010 and 2014. Social media photos and newspaper clippings from cultural events showed him consistently in the company of elegant, sophisticated women, always married, always from prominent families, always looking slightly lost despite their designer clothes and perfect makeup. Their first conversation lasted 3 hours. While other workshop participants struggled with basic Arabic letterforms, Najwa and Sheikh Mahir discussed the philosophical underpinnings of Islamic calligraphy, the way each stroke carried centuries of spiritual meaning. He quoted Rumi in classical Arabic. She responded with verses from Al-Mutanabi. For the first time in years, Najwa felt her mind truly engaged, her thoughts valued, her opinions sought and respected. In 2015, before WhatsApp dominated the region, BlackBerry Messenger was the communication tool of choice for Dubai's elite. The encrypted PIN messaging system offered a sense of privacy that made it perfect for discreet conversations. Within weeks of their first meeting, Najwa and Sheikh Mahir were exchanging dozens of messages daily. His words were poetry disguised as casual conversation. Your mind is as beautiful as your calligraphy. Intelligence like yours shouldn't be hidden behind silence. I see the artist in you that others ignore. The messages recovered from Najwa's phone reveal a masterful seduction, not of her body, but of her starved intellect. Sheikh Mahir sent her photos of rare manuscripts, links to online exhibitions of contemporary Middle Eastern artists, philosophical questions that kept her awake at night thinking of responses. He made her feel like a collaborator in something meaningful, not just a beautiful accessory to someone else's life. Their first intimate encounter happened at Sheikh Mahir's traditional majlis in Old Jumeirah on April 18, 2015. Najwa had told Fawaz she was attending an extended calligraphy workshop, a lie that came surprisingly easily. Security footage from the compound gates shows her white Mercedes entering at 2:15 p.m., Najwa's face visible through the windshield, nervous but exhilarated, alive in a way she hadn't been for years. For victims of domestic abuse, an affair often represents the first autonomous decision they've made in years, explains Dr. Amina Hassan. It's not just about romance or physical passion, It's about reclaiming agency over their own bodies and choices, asserting their right to make decisions about their own lives. Sheikh Mahir's Majlis was a masterpiece of traditional architecture, hand-carved cedar panels from Lebanon, silk cushions in jewel tones, the gentle splash of a courtyard fountain creating an atmosphere of timeless serenity. They talked for hours before anything physical happened, about art, about poetry, about her dreams of maybe studying museum curation in Paris someday. When he finally touched her hand, it felt like a benediction. For 4 months, they met twice weekly. Sheikh Mahir was brilliant at creating cultural alibis, private viewings at galleries in Al-Fahidi Historical District, poetry readings at the Sheikh Mohammed Center for Cultural Understanding, traditional craft workshops in Bastakia. He gave Najwa expensive gifts that spoke to her interests rather than her vanity, first edition books of Arabic poetry, antique silver jewelry from Omani artisans, a professional camera for the photography hobby she'd mentioned wanting to pursue. She hid everything in a safety deposit box at Emirates NBD, creating her first secret space in years. By summer 2015, Najwa was completely transformed, remembers Basma El-Zahra. She was reading poetry again, taking photographs during our coffee meetings, even talking about maybe studying art seriously. Her whole demeanor changed. She walked differently, spoke with more confidence. For the first time since her marriage, she seemed truly awake. But in Dubai's small, interconnected elite community, secrets are nearly impossible to keep indefinitely. Professional surveillance photos taken with telephoto lenses would later surface, showing Najwa and Sheikh Mahir together at various locations, walking through the spice souk, sitting close together at a poetry reading, his hand briefly touching her back as they entered a gallery. Fawaz had hired Tactical Security Solutions, a firm run by former British SAS officers working in the UAE, to conduct what they termed matrimonial surveillance. From May 2015 onwards, Najwa was under complete observation, GPS tracking devices hidden in her handbag, listening devices in her car, even sophisticated phone monitoring equipment that could intercept BlackBerry messages in real time. The question that would haunt investigators later was exactly when Fawaz discovered the affair, and more chillingly, what he was planning to do about it. On July 22, 2015, Fawaz Al-Mansouri sat in his home office reviewing surveillance reports that would change everything. The mahogany-paneled room, lined with first-edition business books and awards from Dubai's Chamber of Commerce, had become his war room. 3 large monitors displayed GPS tracking data, time-stamped photographs, and detailed reports from Tactical Security Solutions. But according to our investigation, his reaction wasn't what anyone expected. "I was there when he got the final confirmation," recalls Ahmad Hassan, Fawaz's former business partner and one of the few people who witnessed his initial response. Photos, location data, phone records, everything laid out like a prosecutor's case file. "I expected him to explode, to call his brothers, to handle it the traditional way: confrontation, family intervention, maybe even violence. Instead, Fawaz became very quiet, very calculating. He stared at the evidence for maybe 20 minutes without saying a word. The surveillance photos were damning. Najwa entering Sheikh Mahir's compound, the two of them walking close together through the gold souk, her hand briefly touching his arm during a gallery opening. But what truly captured Fawaz's attention were the timestamps, the frequency of their meetings, the duration of her visits, the careful pattern of deception she'd woven around her art classes and cultural activities. What Fawaz had learned from his investigators wasn't just about Najwa's affair. Through Dubai's tight-knit business community, where information flowed like currency among the elite, disturbing rumors about Sheikh Mahir had begun to surface. Whispers at the Dubai International Financial Center, carefully worded concerns shared over shisha at exclusive Majlis gatherings, subtle warnings from business associates who had their own reasons to know certain uncomfortable truths. In 2015, HIV diagnosis and treatment in the Gulf region was still heavily stigmatized, explains Dr. Najwa Al-Mansouri, an infectious disease specialist who spoke on condition of anonymity. Wealthy patients often sought treatment abroad to avoid local medical records. London's Harley Street, Swiss private clinics, exclusive medical facilities in Germany, places where discretion was guaranteed and privacy absolute. Through discreet inquiries among Dubai's medical elite, doctors who treated wealthy Emiratis seeking privacy in European clinics, Fawaz's investigators discovered that Sheikh Mahir had been HIV positive since 2013. The medical consultation records from London's Harley Street, heavily redacted but still revealing, painted a picture of a man who had been managing his condition with expensive antiretroviral therapy while maintaining absolute secrecy about his status. There were whispers in the community, reveals an anonymous medical source familiar with the Gulf's elite healthcare networks. A prominent sheikh seeking very specific treatments in Europe, always alone, always paying in cash. The timeline matched his divorce from his second wife in late 2013 and several other relationship endings around the same period. Those who knew began to connect the dots. The divorce records from Sheikh Mahir's second marriage, obtained through legal channels, showed an unusually swift and quiet dissolution. His ex-wife had moved to London immediately after the divorce, citing health reasons. She never remarried, never returned to the Gulf, and according to those who knew her, never spoke about the real reasons for leaving her marriage. This is where Fawaz's plan becomes truly diabolical. A traditional husband, operating within the cultural norms of Emirati society, might have confronted the sheikh directly, demanding satisfaction for the dishonor. He might have exposed the affair publicly, using social pressure to destroy both his wife and her lover. He might have demanded immediate divorce, casting Najwa out of his family with nothing but shame. Instead, Fawaz chose psychological warfare of the most calculated kind. Phone records from August 2015 reveal a chilling transformation in Fawaz's behavior. Instead of restricting Najwa's movements or confronting her about the affair, he actually began creating more opportunities for her to meet Sheikh Mahir. His calendar suddenly filled with convenient business trips to Abu Dhabi and Saudi Arabia. Family obligations that would normally require Najwa's presence were mysteriously rescheduled. Social events where his supervision might limit her freedom were politely declined. This represents a level of calculated cruelty that's almost unprecedented in domestic violence literature, observes Dr. Sarah Mitchell. Most abusers react to infidelity with immediate rage, confrontation, escalating control. Fawaz was essentially using his wife's body as a weapon of mutual destruction, knowing the likely medical consequences of her continued relationship with Sheikh Mahir. For the next month, Fawaz played the role of the trusting, even supportive husband with Oscar-worthy precision. He encouraged Najwa's art classes, suggesting she might benefit from more intensive study. He recommended she take longer cultural trips to galleries in Al Ain and Sharjah, cities conveniently far enough from Dubai to require overnight stays. He even arranged for his mother and sisters to visit relatives in Oman, removing the female supervision that had previously monitored Najwa's daily activities. In August 2015, Mr. Fawaz became almost generous, remembers Hannah Al-Mahmoud, still puzzled by the dramatic change in her employer's behavior, suggesting Mrs. Najwa attend more cultural events, encouraging her photography hobby, even buying her an expensive Nikon camera for her birthday. He told me to give her more freedom, to stop reporting her daily activities. We all thought he was finally learning to treat her better, maybe trying to repair their marriage. BlackBerry messages between Fawaz and Najwa from this period show him being unusually supportive of her activities. "Take your time at the gallery today," he wrote. "Art is important for the soul." Another message, "Stay overnight in Al Ain if the workshop runs late. Ahmed can drive you back tomorrow." Each message was a carefully calculated move in a game Najwa didn't even know she was playing. But Fawaz was also methodically documenting everything. Every lie, every deception, every intimate detail of Najwa's betrayal was recorded, catalogued, and preserved. His private computer files, discovered later during the investigation, contained hundreds of surveillance photos, GPS tracking logs, phone intercepts, and a detailed timeline of the affair that read like a military intelligence report. "He showed me the files in September," recalls Ahmad Hassan, his voice still carrying disbelief years later. "It was like watching someone plan a military operation. Every detail was recorded, every movement tracked, every conversation monitored." He said something that still haunts me. "She thinks she's betraying me, but I'm giving her exactly what she deserves. Justice will be served, but not in the way anyone expects." By August 2015, Najwa's body was sending warning signals that she could no longer ignore. The persistent fatigue that left her exhausted after simple activities like shopping at city center. Unexplained weight loss that made her designer clothes hang loose on her previously perfect figure. Recurring infections, throat irritations, skin rashes, minor fevers that came and went without obvious cause. Initially, she attributed these symptoms to the emotional stress of maintaining her double life, the constant anxiety of deceiving Fawaz, while managing her secret relationship with Sheikh Mahir. Early HIV symptoms often mimic common illnesses, explains Dr. Najwa Al-Mansouri, an infectious disease specialist. Stress, minor infections, fatigue, weight fluctuations. These are things that could easily be explained by lifestyle factors. In 2015, routine HIV testing wasn't standard for married women from conservative families, especially without specific risk factors being disclosed to medical professionals. The medical timeline from August through September 2015 shows a clear pattern of decline. Najwa's regular checkups at American Hospital Dubai, which had previously shown perfect health markers, began revealing concerning trends. Her white blood cell count started dropping. Her lymph nodes became swollen. Night sweats disrupted her sleep, leaving her pale and hollow-eyed despite expensive skincare treatments and professional makeup. When Najwa finally insisted on comprehensive blood work on September 8, 2015, her world shattered completely. The results revealed her worst nightmare. She was HIV positive, and given the viral load detected in her system, had likely been infected for several weeks. The diagnosis came from Dr. Michael Patterson, a British infectious disease specialist at American Hospital who had seen similar cases among Dubai's expatriate community. She called me from the hospital parking garage, completely hysterical, remembers Basma El-Zahra. I could barely understand her through the sobbing. She kept saying, "How could this happen? How could he do this to me?" At first, I thought she meant Fawaz had somehow caused this, maybe infected her himself or exposed her to something deliberately. The idea that Sheikh Mahir was responsible didn't even cross my mind initially. But Najwa's sharp mind was already working through the terrible mathematics of her situation. Her symptoms had started in late July, just weeks after her relationship with Sheikh Mahir had become physical. The timeline was unmistakable, the conclusion unavoidable. The man who had promised her freedom, who had made her feel valued and intellectually alive, had given her a death sentence instead. On September 10, 2015, Najwa drove to Sheikh Mahir's compound in a state witnesses described as barely controlled fury. Gate security footage shows her white Mercedes speeding through the compound entrance at 4:23 p.m., her face visible through the windshield, no longer the composed socialite, but a woman transformed by rage and desperation. She demanded immediate access, brushing past security guards who had never seen the usually gracious Mrs. Al-Mansouri in such a state. She was screaming at him in the courtyard, recalls a security guard who spoke on condition of anonymity, first in Arabic, then switching to English when her fury overwhelmed her ability to find the right words, calling him a murderer, demanding to know how long he'd known about his condition. The sheikh just stood there, very calm, like he'd been expecting this confrontation eventually. According to investigation records, Sheikh Mahir had known about his HIV status since his 2013 diagnosis at a private clinic in London's Harley Street. Medical consultation records suggest he had infected at least 2 other women since his diagnosis, neither of whom were informed of their exposure until they developed symptoms and sought testing independently. He told me I was special, that our connection was blessed by Allah, reveals an anonymous victim who had been involved with Sheikh Mahir in 2014. When I got sick, when the doctors confirmed I was infected, he completely disappeared from my life. When I finally tracked him down and demanded answers, he had me threatened by his security people. He said if I ever spoke about our relationship or made accusations, my family would be destroyed socially and financially. But this confrontation with Najwa would be different. She came from a prominent family with their own connections and resources. She had her own social standing to leverage. And most dangerously for Sheikh Mahir, she had absolutely nothing left to lose. The heated argument in his courtyard lasted over an hour, with Najwa threatening to expose him to health authorities, to the media, to every prominent family in the Gulf whose daughters might be at risk. When Najwa returned home that evening, her rage still burning bright, Fawaz was waiting in his study. But instead of the anger and accusations she expected, he showed her something that would shatter her world completely. Thick folders containing surveillance photos spanning months. Medical records he had somehow obtained. GPS tracking data. Phone intercepts. A complete dossier documenting every aspect of her affair and its consequences. Fawaz had known everything from the beginning, Ahmad Hassan revealed years later. The affair, Sheikh Mahir's HIV status, even the likely timeline of Najwa's infection. He had orchestrated her destruction with surgical precision, using her own desires against her in the most calculated way imaginable. In that moment, Najwa realized the full scope of her husband's revenge. He hadn't just discovered her affair, he had facilitated it, encouraged it, knowing exactly what it would cost her. Every supportive message about her art classes, every convenient business trip that gave her freedom, every generous gesture that had surprised the household staff, all had been carefully calculated moves in a game designed to destroy her. But Fawaz's plan had one critical flaw. He had underestimated Najwa's intelligence, her fury, and her willingness to take everyone down with her. Armed with Fawaz's surveillance files and her own evidence of Sheikh Mahir's pattern of infection, Najwa began planning her final move. If she was going to die, she would expose them both in the process. In her private art studio, surrounded by the paintings that had once represented her dreams of freedom, she methodically copied files to USB drives, made digital recordings of her story, and prepared evidence packages that would outlive her. She said she was going to destroy everyone who had used her as a pawn, recalls Basma El-Zahra, who met with Najwa during those final desperate days. Fawaz, Sheikh Mahir, even the doctors who had covered up the infections. She wanted justice, even if she didn't live to see it. There was something terrifying about her calm during those last conversations, like she had moved beyond fear into pure determination. On September 20th, 2015, Najwa made copies of all evidence and distributed them strategically. Her lawyer received sealed packages with instructions not to open them unless she failed to check in. A women's rights activist at the Emirates Women's Association was given duplicate files. A journalist at Gulf News, known for investigating stories the establishment preferred to keep buried, received the most comprehensive package of all. She arranged what she told Sheikh Mahir would be their final meeting for September 22nd. Using delayed email services available in 2015, Najwa had essentially created a dead man's switch. If she didn't log in and reset the timer every 48 hours, the evidence would be automatically sent to multiple recipients' media outlets, human rights organizations, medical authorities, and prominent families whose daughters might be at risk from Sheikh Mahir's predatory behavior. The abandoned villa where Najwa's body was found on September 23rd belonged to one of Fawaz's development companies. The Al-Kawanij project had been stalled since 2014 due to permit issues with Dubai municipality, leaving a half-finished luxury compound in the desert, miles from the nearest inhabited area. Crime scene photos show a partially constructed villa with exposed concrete walls, unfinished rooms, and construction equipment covered in months of desert dust. The scene was highly unusual, explains Detective Sarah Al-Zahra, who led the initial investigation. Najwa appeared to have been living in the partially finished villa for at least 24 hours before her death. There were art supplies scattered around, bottled water, energy bars. Most disturbing were the paintings she had been working on, desperate, haunting images that seemed to tell the story of her final hours. The paintings found at the scene depicted shadowy male figures looming over a trapped woman, desert landscapes that seemed to stretch into infinity, and self-portraits that showed a woman slowly fading away. Her final painting, left unfinished, showed two men standing over a prone female figure, one in traditional Emirati dress, one in a Western suit, both with their faces obscured but their body language suggesting ownership and control. Medical examination revealed Najwa had died from complications related to advanced HIV infection, accelerated by stress, dehydration, and malnutrition. But the circumstances of how she ended up in that remote location remained mysterious. The victim showed signs of having been moved while unconscious or incapacitated, noted Dr. Najwa Al-Mansouri in her forensic report. While HIV complications were the ultimate cause of death, the isolation and circumstances suggested possible wrongful imprisonment. Despite the evidence packages Najwa had prepared, prosecuting Fawaz Al-Mansouri and Sheikh Mahir proved impossible in 2015's legal landscape. The UAE's legal system was not equipped to handle this type of case. Marital rape wasn't criminalized, HIV disclosure wasn't legally required, and domestic abuse by wealthy men was routinely overlooked by authorities who prioritized social stability over individual justice. The court documents and legal motions tell a story of systematic dismissal. Fawaz's legal team argued that any evidence obtained through surveillance was inadmissible. Sheikh Mahir's lawyers claimed that HIV status was private medical information that couldn't be disclosed without patient consent. The prosecution, already reluctant to pursue a case that would embarrass prominent families, found itself overwhelmed by expensive legal challenges. Fawaz inherited all of Najwa's assets and publicly mourned his wife's tragic illness. Local media coverage focused on his grief, his generous donations to HIV research, his calls for better medical care for women. Sheikh Mahir quietly relocated to Doha, citing business expansion opportunities in Qatar's growing economy. Neither man faced any legal consequences for their roles in Najwa's destruction. The most chilling part was how quickly it was all covered up, reflects investigator James Wright. Within weeks, both men were back to their normal lives, attending the same social events, making the same business deals. Fawaz even started dating again within 6 months. It was like Najwa had never existed. But Najwa's story didn't end with her death. Her evidence packages, though insufficient for criminal prosecution, sparked conversations across the Gulf region about women's rights and medical disclosure. News clips from 2016 show early discussions about domestic violence legislation and HIV disclosure requirements that would eventually become law. Najwa's case became a rallying point for women's rights advocates across the region, explains Dr. Amina Hassan. While justice was denied in court, her story inspired legislative changes that came years later. By 2020, the UAE had strengthened laws around domestic violence and medical disclosure. 2 other women came forward with similar stories about Sheikh Mahir, leading to his eventual exile from the Gulf entirely. Najwa Al-Mansouri wanted love and freedom. In death, she achieved something more lasting. She exposed the deadly cost of unchecked male power and the courage required to speak truth in a world built on beautiful lies. Her story reminds us that even in the most gilded cages, the human spirit yearns for justice.